Prologue, Geralt of Rivia. The cold woke him before the pain did. It was not mountain cold. Geralt knew that kind. Wind scraping over stone, snow forced beneath a collar, fingers stiffening around a sword hilt. This was quieter. It had settled through leather, mail, and flesh without disturbing any of them, as though his body had been lying in the snow long enough for winter to begin considering it property. He opened his eyes. Pines crowded the clearing. Their branches sagged under old snow, but no wind moved them. No bird called. Nothing scratched beneath the crusted white. His breath smoked once before him and thinned into the gray morning. Geralt rolled onto one knee and waited for the world to stop leaning. Pain followed. Left shoulder. 2 ribs on the same side, bruised but not broken. A hard ache behind his eyes. He tested his fingers, ankles, balance, then the 2 sword hilts across his back. Both blades remained in their scabbards. The wolf medallion still hung at his chest. Everything else was less certain. A road under rain, blood in wagon ruts, light folding where no light should fold. For one instant he had seen a figure beyond it, human in outline, wrong in proportion, and then the world had pulled sideways. Yennefer came back to him as violet eyes and a voice sharpened by impatience. Ciri was ash-blonde hair disappearing between trees. Dandelion was a complaint begun before the danger and certain to outlive it. None of them were here. Geralt stood. The clearing tilted again. Less this time. He tasted blood where he had bitten the inside of his cheek. Pine. Frozen soil. Old animal droppings. 3 horses somewhere north of him, nervous enough that their sweat carried through the trees. And magic. The medallion trembled against his sternum. He drew it from beneath his collar. Frost rhymed the Iron Wolf's ears. The vibration came in slow pulses, too steady for a nearby spell and too strong to dismiss as residue from whatever had brought him here. Wonderful, he muttered. Snow preserved tracks well when it chose to. 3 mounted men had circled the clearing before continuing north. One horse was larger than the others and poorly suited to broken woodland. The smallest rider dismounted twice, a scout perhaps. The 3rd man favored his right leg when walking, and the prince beside his mount showed missing toes or an old stiffness in the foot. Across their trail ran something else. It had left no ordinary print. The snow was not compressed, only changed. Frost feathered outward in thin white branches, delicate as fern leaves and cold enough to ache behind Geralt's eyes. He touched one edge with a bare fingertip. The cold bit instantly. Not numbness, pain, clean and deep. He pulled his hand away. The medallion's pulse quickened. Geralt put his glove back on and followed the horses. The tracks descended into a narrow ravine where roots broke through black rock. The scent of horse grew stronger. So did human fear, sour beneath wool, leather, and unwashed skin. Steel whispered from a sheath ahead, "Stand where you are." Geralt stopped. 3 men waited among the horses. All wore black. The youngest stood in front, slender and straight-backed beneath fine ringmail and a sable cloak too expensive for any scout Geralt had known. His longsword had a jeweled pommel and an edge that had seen more whetstone than blood. 18, perhaps. Young enough to mistake being obeyed for being right. Behind him an older man held a scarred sword low beside his leg. His hood had slipped back, exposing the smooth scars where frost had taken both ears. One glove ended short around a missing little finger. The last man was thin and watchful, a hunter, by the way. His weight rested on the outside edges of his boots. He kept an arrow nocked, but had not drawn. The hunter saw Geralt's eyes and went pale. "White Walker," he breathed. The old man's blade came up. Geralt raised both hands away from his swords. "No." The young knight studied him. Fear was present, but pride had found a place in front of it. "You have the eyes of a beast and 2 swords on your back. That is not an answer." Geralt of Rivia, Witcher. Nothing in their faces suggested recognition. "Sir Waymar Royce," the young man said, as if a name ought to balance the exchange. He indicated the others without looking away from Geralt. "Gared, Will, we are sworn brothers of the Night's Watch." Night Watch of what? Geralt wondered. "You're ranging." Will's bow lowered a finger's breadth. "How would you know that?" Geralt looked at their cloaks, horses, weapons, bedrolls, and the black mud dried nearly to the knees. Lucky guess. Garrett's mouth tightened. Royce either missed the mockery or chose not to acknowledge it. "We are tracking wildling raiders," Royce said. 8. Will found them dead 2 miles from here. When we returned, their bodies were gone. Geralt looked toward the narrowing ravine. "Gone how?" "Gone is gone," Garrett said. His voice was rough with age and cold. "We should be riding south." "They left their weapons," Will added. "Food, too. Dead when I saw them. Gone when we came back." The medallion struck once against Geralt's chest, hard enough to be felt through mail. One of the horses screamed. The destrier tore at its reins, rolling its eyes toward the trees. Rime spread across the bit between its teeth. The other animals began fighting their tethers. Geralt lowered his hands. "Get behind me." Royce gave a short, unbelieving laugh. "You presume much for a stranger found crawling in the snow." The air changed before Geralt could answer. His next breath hurt. Frost formed along the ringmail at Royce's shoulders. Will's bowstring tightened with a faint, crystalline creak. Beyond them, something pale moved between 2 pines without disturbing either branch. It stepped into the ravine. Tall and narrow, armored in surfaces that borrowed the colors around them. Gray bark, white snow, the black between trees. Its flesh was milk-pale and dry-looking, stretched over a face too exact to be mistaken for a corpse. Blue light burned in its eyes. The sword in its hand seemed grown rather than forged, a translucent sliver with moonlight moving inside it. Not a specter, not a higher vampire, not anything Geralt knew. The medallion shuddered violently. Royce drew his sword. "Don't meet that blade," Geralt said. The warning struck pride before it reached judgment. Royce stepped forward, throwing his sable cloak behind one shoulder. "I will not hide behind." The pale creature crossed the distance without appearing to hurry. Royce met the first cut with castle-forged steel. The sound was thin and high, more like ice under pressure than metal. Frost leapt from the point of contact and raced a handspan down Royce's blade. He recoiled, shocked but still holding it. Geralt had silver free before the second stroke. He did not parry. He turned past it, felt cold shear along his sleeve, and cut across the creature's forearm. Silver opened pale flesh. White vapor hissed from the wound, and the creature moved back for the first time. Its attention settled on him. Intelligence looked out through the blue. "Silver," Geralt said. "Good to know." It answered in a language like lake ice breaking at midnight. Shapes emerged among the trees behind it. 2, then another. Patient, nearly invisible when they stopped moving. Will loosed. The arrow struck the first creature's shifting armor and skittered away. Frost raced down the shaft as it spun, splitting the wood before it reached the ground. "Horses," Geralt said. "Now." The creature attacked. Geralt gave it no blade to bind against. He slipped outside the first cut, ducked the return, and carved silver along its ribs. The wound opened with a crackle of rime. No blood came. Frost pulled the edges together almost at once, slower where silver had touched but not stopped. Wounds. Doesn't kill. Regenerates. He formed Ard with his free hand. Force burst through the ravine. Loose snow erupted from the ground. The creature slid backward 2 paces, feet scoring pale lines through the crust, but did not fall. One of the watchers turned its head toward Geralt's hand. Royce mistook interruption for opportunity. He charged with both hands on his sword. Geralt saw the commitment, the angle, and the frost already whitening the steel. "Royce!" The young knight swung. The creature's parry was almost casual. Royce's sword shattered. Steel burst into glittering fragments. One shard punched through the leather above his left cheek. Another vanished into the snow. Royce dropped to one knee with both hands rising toward his face. The pale sword entered beneath his lifted arm, passed through ringmail as if through wet cloth, and came out below the opposite ribs. Royce made a small sound. Surprise more than pain. The creature drew the blade free. His blood struck the snow steaming red. Frost formed around each drop before it could sink. Royce folded onto his side, sable cloak spreading behind him. Garid roared and lunged for the body. The next pale stroke would have taken his head. Geralt cast Quen between them. Gold flared. The crystal sword hit the barrier, and the sign broke with a sound like a bronze bell dropped from a tower. The impact numbed Geralt's teeth and sent Garid sprawling, but the blade had not reached him. "Take the boy," Geralt said. Will dropped his bow and seized Royce beneath the shoulders. Garid caught his legs. Together they dragged him towards the horses, his fine cloak gathering snow and blood. The watchers began to move. Geralt laid Yrden across the ravine. Violet lines burned briefly beneath the snow, forming a narrow circle between roots and stone. The first creature crossed into it and slowed. Not much, but enough for Geralt to step inside its reach, strike the wrist, and cut deep along the throat. Silver bit. Vapor poured from the wound. The creature seized his shoulder with its free hand. Cold went through leather and mail into bone. Geralt twisted away before the grip closed fully. His injured ribs protested. His breath came shorter now. 4 pale shapes stood inside the ravine, and more blue eyes watched through the trees. No contract was worth this. No unanswered question either. He backed toward a fallen pine where split wood glistened with exposed resin. The first creature followed, still slowed by Yrden, its throat knitting white behind him. Geralt shaped Igni. Flame rolled over resin, dead needles, and torn bark. The pine caught with a violent orange rush. Heat punched outward. Snow collapsed into hissing water. The pale creature stopped on the far side of the fire. Not afraid, Geralt thought. Assessing. The distinction mattered. He stored it beside silver wounds and frost heals. He sent another short Ard into the burning needles. Sparks and flame spread across the narrow floor of the ravine, not enough to hold for long, but enough to disrupt a clean pursuit. The second sign left black flecks at the edge of his vision. Geralt turned and ran. Branches struck his face. His side pulsed with each stride. Behind him there was no chase he could hear, only the dry crack of fire, and once something that might have been laughter made from breaking ice. The Rangers had Royce across the destrier's saddle. Will was trying to keep the maddened horse from throwing both corpse and tack. Garid held his sword in one hand and the reins of the two Garans in the other. "Ride," Geralt said. "Is he—" Will began. "Dead. Ride." They rode until the trees opened and the unnatural cold weakened behind them. Only then did Garid pull Royce down from the saddle. The young knight's face looked smaller in death. The shard had ruined his left eye. His right remained half open, gray and empty. The wound beneath his arm had stopped bleeding despite the heart having ceased only minutes before. Frost webbed the broken rings around it. Geralt touched the edge of the wound with 2 fingers. The cold inside it was deeper than the air. "We burn him," he said. Garid stared as if Geralt had suggested eating the corpse. "He is a son of Runestone." "He's dead." "He is a sworn brother and a lord's son. His father gets his bones. If that blade changed him, his father may get more than bones." Will looked from Royce to the dark line of forest behind them. "Changed him how?" Geralt stood. The medallion had settled from a violent shudder to a low warning tremor. "Show me where you found the wildlings." Gared's jaw worked beneath his beard. "You heard me. We go south." 8 bodies vanished. The creatures came from the same direction. If the dead are still there, I need to see what they're becoming. And if those things are waiting... Geralt looked at the frost spreading one thread at a time through Royce's wound. "Then you can tell me I was wrong while we run." No one laughed. They left Royce wrapped in his sable cloak beside the horses. Gared remained with him, sword drawn. Will guided Geralt north on foot, moving quietly now that fear had burned the clumsiness out of him. The wildling camp lay beside a narrow stream under an ironwood ridge. Its lean-to had collapsed beneath snow. Weapons remained where their owners had dropped them: bows, 2 short swords, a double-bladed axe half buried near a dead man's hand. The bodies had returned, or something had returned them. 8 men and women lay around the clearing in positions too composed to be the result of battle. No open throats, no split skulls, no blood. One sat against the rock with his chin lowered to his chest. A woman lay on her back with both hands at her sides, eyes open to the paling sky. Another had been placed in the fork of an ironwood, as if still keeping watch. Will stopped behind Geralt. "They weren't here when we came back." "I believe you." That frightened the man more than disbelief would have. Geralt crouched beside the nearest corpse. The skin was cold but not stiff in the ordinary way. Beneath it ran fine crystalline lines, beginning around the veins and spreading into the surrounding flesh. He removed a glove and pressed 2 fingers against the dead man's neck. No pulse, no breath. Something inside the body answered the touch with a faint crackle. He checked the eyes. Brown but blue had begun gathering around the pupil in a ring thin enough to miss, unless one knew to look. The second corpse showed the same change. So did the third. The oldest wildling had progressed furthest. Frost showed clearly beneath his cheeks and along both hands. When Geralt bent one finger, the resistance came from more than rigor. Tissue had stiffened around the crystalline threads, reorganized rather than merely frozen. The man's smallest finger moved back after Geralt released it. Will made a choking sound. Geralt drew silver and put the point through the corpse's eye into the brain. The body jerked once. The medallion's vibration sharpened, then returned to its earlier pulse. Silver affects the changed dead, too. Useful, not enough. He examined the entry wound. Frost began closing around the blade before he withdrew it. "What are they?" Will whispered. "Not the pale ones." Geralt wiped his blade on the dead man's furs. Something made from what they kill. He had seen necrophages fed by battlefields, wraiths held by grief, corpses driven by curses and hunger. This was none of those. The change came from inside the flesh and used cold as both tool and shelter. It did not possess the corpse. It remade it. Cold keeps them, he thought. Silver wounds them. Fire should end the process. Should. He disliked the word. The medallion changed rhythm as he approached the ironwood. The dead woman in its branches was young. She had climbed high enough to see the clearing and not high enough to escape whatever had found her. One hand was tangled in her furs. The other was closed around something small. Geralt climbed onto the lowest branch and worked her fingers open. Two snapped at the joints, brittle from cold. An egg-shaped stone rested in her palm, no larger than a hen's egg. Its surface was dark, veined with crimson, and carved into a face whose parts had been arranged without regard for the places faces kept them. Turned one way, it appeared to weep. Turned another, the mouth seemed caught in a scream. It was warm. The medallion responded with a low, steady hum, unlike its alarm around the pale creatures. Geralt turned the stone between thumb and forefinger. No seam, no scent of blood, oil or mineral he recognized. The warmth did not fade in the air. Unknown artifact, active magic, found in the hand of a dead woman beyond an impossible wall he had not yet seen. Dangerous. He put it in the inner pouch at his belt. "You're keeping it?" Will asked. "Until I know why I shouldn't." The old wildling's hand scraped across the snow. Will stumbled backward. Geralt crossed the clearing and drove silver through the base of the skull. The corpse convulsed. Blue opened fully in one eye. "Get Garrod," Geralt said. "Bring everything that burns." They pulled the lean-to apart and built the pyre from its timbers. Dead pine, broken boughs, brush, and the wildling's spare furs. There was no lamp oil. Geralt cut resin from the split trees and packed it among the driest wood. Igni started the first flame. Patience made it spread. The process took the rest of the night. Fire did what silver had not. Frost blackened beneath skin, cracked, then vanished in bursts of white vapor. Bodies that had begun to move stopped. The medallion grew quieter with each one consumed. Garrod watched without speaking. Once, when a woman's back arched inside the fire and blue light opened behind her eyelids, his scarred hand found the place where his missing finger should have been. Royce lay 30 paces away, kept apart from the heat. Geralt went to him when the last pyre settled. The frost around the wound had spread beneath the arm and across the left side of the chest. Slowly, deliberately. "You saw what happened," Geralt said. Garrod did not look at him. "I saw wildlings burn. You saw dead flesh move. And I heard Sir Waymar give his name before he died." Garrod's voice hardened. "His father is Jan Royce. His brothers are men of the Vale. If 3 black brothers return with a lord's son turned to ash and a tale about demons, they will say, 'We murdered him.' If we return with his body and that broken sword, men may listen." It was not only tradition then, proof. Fear of the living laid over fear of the dead. Geralt understood the calculation. He did not agree with it. "Keep him cold," he said. "As cold as you can. Bind the hands and jaw. If the eyes turn blue, don't wait for permission." Will swallowed. "And if they don't?" "Burn him anyway." Dawn found them riding south. Royce's body was wrapped in sable and lashed across his destrier. Garred had tied the wrists and ankles beneath a cloak where a passerby would not see. Will rode with a broken sword strapped beside his bow. A wildling Garen, found trembling in brush beyond the camp, carried Geralt. The ride to the wall took 9 days. They packed Royce in snow each night. On the third day, Geralt found frost threading farther from the wound. On the fifth, the dead man's right eye had filmed pale at the edges. He did not move. The deeper cold seemed to preserve the change without completing it, holding the corpse at a threshold. At night, Geralt took the second watch, whether assigned or not. The wall appeared first as a white line where the earth should have ended. It grew until it filled half the sky. Ice raised higher than any fortress, blue in its depths, old magic sleeping inside it. Geralt's medallion stirred as they passed beneath, though whether for the wall or the warm stone in his pouch, he could not tell. The men at Castle Black took his swords, searched his gear, and argued about his eyes. The dark stone drew a low hum from the medallion when a steward handled the pouch. So Geralt called it a keepsake and took it back before curiosity became confiscation. Lord Commander Mormont listened to Garred and Will separately. Maester Aemon examined Royce but could not explain the frost beneath the skin. The broken sword lay across the table between them. Its steel splintered in a way no ordinary cold should have managed. They did not burn the body. Royce was noble-born. Runestone had to be informed. The watch needed witnesses brought before the Warden of the North, and Geralt, armed stranger, mutant, possible sorcerer, found beyond the wall with no history any maester recognized, was not free to wander south alone. Mormont ordered the corpse kept packed in ice and sent a raven to Winterfell. Geralt repeated his warning. The old commander heard it. That was not the same as obeying it. 17 days later, Winterfell rose out of mist and dark pine. Steam from the hot springs curled along its walls. Towers and battlements stood on stone older than the kingdoms named by the men around him. Geralt smelled horses, forge smoke, wet wool, dogs, cooked onions, and hundreds of people before the gates opened. The kennel hounds began barking as soon as he entered. 2 young direwolves in the yard went still. One gray, one mottled silver-brown. Their hackles lifted as Geralt passed. They did not look at his swords. Their attention followed the medallion beneath his shirt, then shifted to the pouch at his hip. "Smart," Geralt murmured. The swords were taken again. This time his hands were loosely manacled as well. Courtesy, by northern standards, the chain was long enough to walk comfortably, and no one struck him. Waymar Royce was carried below before sunset. Not among the Stone Kings themselves, Geralt was told, but into a cold side vault adjoining Winterfell's crypts until men from House Royce could come north for him. A guard was placed outside the iron-banded door. Cold slows it, Geralt thought, as the bearers disappeared underground. It does not stop it. Eddard Stark received them in the Great Hall. He listened first to Will, then Garred, then Geralt. He interrupted rarely. Gray eyes moved to each speaker and stayed there until the answer was finished. He read Mormont's letter twice, and examined the broken sword himself. Geralt had dealt with kings who heard only praise, aldermen who heard only coin, and frightened villagers who heard only the answer they already wanted. Stark listened. That made the refusal worse when it came. "Burn Royce," Geralt said. The hall quieted. Ned Stark rested one hand on the table beside the shattered blade. He was a son of Runestone and a sworn brother of the Night's Watch. Now he's a corpse with magic spreading through him. Maester Luwin found no life. I didn't say he was alive. Garrett looked down. Will stared at the floor between his boots. Ned's face remained composed, but Geralt saw the pressure beneath it. The Ranger's matching testimony, Mormont's uncertainty, the impossible sword, all weighed against duty to a house that had entrusted a son to the north. "The wildlings moved after death?" Ned asked. "One did. Fire stopped it. Silver wounded the pale creature that killed Royce, but didn't kill it. And you believe Royce will rise? I believe something is trying to make him." The distinction landed. Ned glanced toward the doors through which the body had been carried. "House Royce has the right to its dead," he said. "I will not burn their son on the word of a stranger, even one supported by men of the Watch." "Then don't do it on my word. Look beneath his arm. Watch the veins. Watch the eye. He will remain in the cold vault. The door will be guarded, and no one will enter without my leave. A raven has gone to Runestone." "Cold keeps it," Geralt said. "That's part of the problem." Ned Stark held his gaze for a long moment. "You will remain at Winterfell until I understand what you are, and what happened beyond the wall." "Fair." The chamber they gave him was above ground, which made it better than a dungeon and worse than freedom. One narrow window, straw mattress, water, a guard outside. His swords were elsewhere, but the medallion and pouch had been returned after the stone inside proved to be only an ugly stone to everyone without a Witcher's medallion. Geralt sat on the edge of the mattress and took out the object. Warmth filled his palm. The crimson grooves looked darker in candlelight. One carved eye sat near the narrow end. The mouth lay against one side, lips drawn back from tiny stone teeth. He turned it, and the face became almost coherent before slipping apart again. The medallion hummed. Below him, under tons of old stone, Waymar Royce lay in a chamber made cold for the honored dead. His wrists were bound beneath his ruined sable cloak. A guard stood beyond the door. Frost continued traveling through veins that no longer carried blood. Geralt closed his fist around the warm stone. The world had rules. Even the worst curse obeyed something. He only needed to learn the rules before the dead did.